Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. When we think of crimes committed on Halloween, we tend to conjure images of maniacal strangers poisoning Halloween candy and putting razor blades in apples. While these fears normally exist firmly in the realm of urban legend, rarely being substantiated beyond a few isolated incidents involving family members, such as the infamous 1974 poisoning of Timothy O'Brien, it hasn't stopped many parents and children alike from developing serious trepidation around the spooky holiday. However, this isn't to say that serious crimes haven't been committed on Halloween. Over the years, the night has played host to a variety of brutal crimes, many of which are made all the more chilling due to their occurrence on a day already steeped in the celebration of all things terrifying. Today, we wanted to take a look at 3 such cases, chilling stories that either took place on Halloween or in close proximity to it. Before we get to today's stories, if you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. And if you've watched a few of our videos already, you might not even realize that you're not subscribed. While you're there, don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. With that out of the way, here are 3 chilling Halloween true crime stories. On the night of October 29th, 2016, 26-year-old Michael Matta was hosting a Halloween party with some friends at his home on the 2900 block of Aspen Meadow in San Antonio, Texas. The party began around midnight and quickly got into full swing, and Matta was happy to see that everyone was playing games and enjoying themselves. However, the night's friendly atmosphere quickly changed when sometime after 4 a.m., a group of mysterious men showed up and started walking towards the house. Leading the group was a man dressed in a Freddy Krueger mask. Realizing that these people were strangers who obviously had not been invited to the party, Matta and his friends stopped them at the door and attempted to turn them away. However, instead of leaving, the men attempted to push past. Almost immediately, a shoving match began in the front yard of Matta's home, and threats were being made by the unknown men. One of them told Matta's friend to fight him one-on-one. Before anyone could react, the situation turned into utter chaos when the man in the Freddy Krueger mask pulled out a shotgun and began to fire at anyone he could within range. Matta would later say that he initially thought the rounds were warning shots, only to realize the horror of what was happening. 4 men and 1 woman were shot, among them one of Matta's closest friends and roommates, Louise Carrasco. Police arrived on the scene just before 5 a.m., but by that time, the shooter and his friends were long gone. Though thankfully 4 of the 5 victims of the shooting would make quick recoveries and would be released from the hospital almost immediately, Louise wasn't so lucky. He was critically injured by a bullet that had struck him in the abdomen and would have to undergo multiple surgeries. The news came as an extra blow because Louise was a champion boxer who had dreams of going pro. The investigation into the terrifying shooting would last almost exactly a year, until a 22-year-old man named Robert Contreras was arrested for the crime. While it hasn't been reported exactly how detectives managed to uncover that he was the gunman, reports allege that witnesses were able to pick him out of a lineup. It's not clear how they were able to do this considering he was wearing a mask, but perhaps there were additional details explaining this that were never released to the public. In any case, Contreras was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and unlawful carry of a weapon. Sadly, it appears that Louise Carrasco passed away almost 3 years to the day after the terrifying incident at the Halloween party, likely from complications from the shooting. While we could not 100% confirm this, we found what appears to be an online obituary for him, complete with name, age, and location that all seem to match. The photo included in the obituary also seems to match one that we found on a GoFundMe page for Louise that had been made right after the shooting to help with his medical expenses. For his part, Michael Matta told the media that he regretted not calling the police sooner when the fight broke out at his house, and that he would never throw another party again. Sometime after 11 p.m. on Halloween of 1957, the doorbell rang at the home of Peter and Betty Fabiano in Sun Valley, California. Though the couple had turned their lights out a short time earlier and headed to bed, Peter assumed that it was simply a late-night trick-or-treater and walked downstairs to answer the door. Mildly annoyed that anyone would still be trick-or-treating at this time of night, when Peter opened the door, he immediately said, "Isn't it kind of late for this type of thing?" Without replying, the mysterious figure at the door held up something concealed inside a brown paper bag and pointed it at him. There was a loud bang, and Peter fell to the floor. He had been shot in the chest. When Betty ran downstairs to investigate, she found her husband lying motionless and covered in blood. He would die on his way to the hospital. News of the so-called trick-or-treat murder quickly made its way into the headlines, terrifying local residents. Perhaps most chilling of all, no one could think of any reason why anyone would want to harm the Fabianos. Peter was the proud owner of 2 beauty salons, and aside from the time that he had spent working as a bookie years earlier in New York, he had no connections to anything remotely criminal. Thankfully, it wouldn't take long to solve Peter's murder, though the truth would come as a further shock to the public. It turned out that at the time Peter Fabiano had been murdered, he and Betty had recently reconciled after a particularly rough patch in their marriage. For a time, Betty had actually moved out of the house and was staying with a family friend named Joan Rabble. Rabble was a former employee at one of Peter's beauty salons and had quickly gotten close to the Fabianos after being hired. However, as things got worse in the Fabianos' marriage, it soon became clear that Betty and Rabble were more than just friends. After allegedly continuing the romantic relationship for a while living together, eventually Betty wanted to return to Peter. He agreed on the condition that Joan Rabble no longer be part of their lives. Needless to say, Rabble did not take this news well, and immediately began plotting against Peter. To carry out his murder, Rabble enlisted the help of another woman she was romantically involved with, 42-year-old Goldine Pizer. Because of her affection for Rabble, Pizer proved extremely suggestible, and believed Rabble when she began to tell her all sorts of awful things about Peter. Rabble explained that Peter was a vile, evil man who wanted to destroy all the people around him. For months, the women planned out the crime, with Rabble masterminding the scheme. She paid for the .38 caliber Smith & Wesson that Pizer would use to shoot Peter, borrowed a car from one of her friends so that she could drive them to the location, and took Pizer by the Fabianos' house so that she would be able to recognize him. On the night of the murder, Rabble dressed Pizer in blue jeans, a khaki jacket, red gloves, and heavy makeup. The costume was completed by a domino mask, the kind popularly worn by comic book superheroes. When the two arrived at the house, they waited until the lights went out, and after some final words of encouragement, Pizer was sent on her way. The two women took off immediately after the deed was done, burned their clothes, and parted ways. Rabble allegedly told Pizer before they split up, "Forget you ever knew me." Unfortunately for the two women, things unraveled when police found out about the trouble in Peter and Betty's marriage, and learned about Betty's affair with Rabble. The final nail in the coffin came when investigators discovered the murder weapon in a rented locker registered to Pizer. She had failed to dispose of the weapon after committing the crime. At trial, both Pizer and Rabble pleaded innocent, Pizer by reason of insanity. She claimed that she had no motive to kill Peter, and that she had been unduly coerced by Rabble, whose lies she had believed. Both women were eventually convicted of second-degree murder and given sentences of 5 years to life. Though little is known of what became of them after that, it is reported that both would eventually be released from prison. Though there has long been speculation as to Betty's involvement in her husband's murder as well, this has never been proven, and she was never charged in connection with the case. She reportedly died in 1999 at the age of 81. On the night of October 26, 2014, more than 800 people showed up for a massive Halloween party on a rural property in Frenchtown Township, Michigan. If you lived in the area, it was reportedly impossible not to have heard about the event. It was set to be a legendary evening full of seasonal festivities, music, and alcohol. Like many people her age, 22-year-old Chelsea Bruck had been eager to attend the party. The aspiring culinary student arrived with friends that night dressed as the Batman villain Poison Ivy, a homemade costume that she had worked on for weeks, complete with a maroon wig, red lipstick, and a green top that she had painstakingly sewn fake leaves onto. The night progressed quickly, and by all accounts Chelsea and her friends seemed to be having exactly the kind of fun party experience that they had hoped for. However, eventually all good things come to an end, and by the early hours of the next morning, many people had left, or were starting to think about going home. This included Chelsea, who was seen leaving around 3 a.m. However, she would never make it home. The following day, a search was launched, and police began the meticulous task of questioning those that had attended the massive party. It was quickly discovered that Chelsea was not in possession of her cell phone at the time she went missing. She had left the phone in her friend's car, and before leaving, that friend had given it to another friend and told them to find Chelsea. That friend was never able to track her down. Further interviews with partygoers soon led police to their first suspect, an unknown man who had been seen leaving the party around the same time as Chelsea. The man had been witnessed talking to her. Based on these accounts, a sketch was created and circulated as the desperate search for Chelsea continued. Over the next few weeks, Chelsea's terrified family made desperate appeals to the public for any information concerning her whereabouts. A $5,000 reward was quickly increased to $17,000, and search areas were also widened, but still, no trace of Chelsea was found. Then, in April of the following year, a construction crew made a grisly discovery while doing excavation work on a piece of property in the village of Carlton. The workers found the lifeless body of Chelsea Bruck in a wooded area near some train tracks, approximately 10 miles away from where the Halloween party had been held months earlier. In September, a further discovery was made near the site, when the leggings from Chelsea's costume were recovered by police. A male DNA profile was extracted from a semen sample found on the leggings, leading investigators to believe that it was only a matter of time before the case would be solved. The final break came in July of 2016, when detectives discovered that there had been a match to their unknown sample found in the CODIS DNA database. It belonged to a 27-year-old man named Daniel Clay, who had just been charged in a separate criminal sexual assault case. During police questioning, Clay would admit to being at the Halloween party that night and to being involved in Chelsea's death, but claimed that he had not murdered her. He said that after leaving the party at the same time, he had offered Chelsea a ride and she had accepted. Though this seemed to track with what witnesses had observed, it was what Clay told detectives next that seemed completely unbelievable. He claimed that shortly after picking Chelsea up, the two of them had become intimate, and that during their encounter, Chelsea had asked him to choke her. Clay said that he did so for 20 or 30 seconds, only to realize that she was dead. Panicked, he said he drove around for almost an hour before discarding her body in the wooded area where it had eventually been found. Police didn't buy the story for several reasons. For starters, based on the evidence of trauma to Chelsea's body, it appeared that whatever had happened to her before her death had been far from romantic. It looked as though she had been beaten and had sustained serious injuries to her face. It was also highly unlikely that she would have died from strangulation after the mere 20 to 30 second time frame that Clay claimed. This just wouldn't have been long enough to kill someone, especially if it had happened the way that Clay said. Finally, Chelsea hadn't died from asphyxiation. She had died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely during the beating she had endured from her attacker. When Clay was presented with these inconsistencies, he changed his story over and over again, but could never provide an adequate explanation. Eventually, Clay's girlfriend would also come forward and allege that he had confessed to committing the murder to her in 2 separate phone calls. In July of 2017, Daniel Clay was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Chelsea Bruck and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would appeal this sentence, but in 2019, it was upheld by the State Court of Appeals. That brings us to the end of our list. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.